The urgent notice issued by the Kuki-Zo Council on September 15, 2025 has once again shifted the focus back to the volatile situation in Manipur. The council clarified that it had never declared the reopening of National Highway NH-02 for free movement of commuters and goods. What the Ministry of Home Affairs had mandated was limited facilitation for safe passage under controlled circumstances, not an invitation for unrestricted access. Misinterpretation of these directives has created confusion, but the Council's statement seeks to remind the public that in the prevailing security context, such an opening would amount to exposing the hills and their people to grave danger. At the heart of this clarification lies the fragile system of buffer zones created in 2023. After violent clashes swept through Manipur in May of that year, central forces were deployed to man separation zones between the Meitei Majority Valley and the Kuki-Zo-dominated hills. These buffer zones were never perfect, but they offered a minimum guarantee against fresh bloodshed. In many areas, including Kangpokpi and Churachandpur, Kuki volunteers reinforced these positions with their own patrols, aware that their survival could not be entrusted solely to official forces. To speak of dismantling buffer zones or reopening the highway without addressing the conditions of disarmament is, in their view, a call for renewed violence. The scars of 2023 and 2024 are too fresh to ignore. In Churachandpur, large-scale gunfights reduced neighborhoods to smoldering ruins and displaced thousands. Sugnu became infamous for the viral videos that showed bombs being thrown while state police commandos allegedly stood alongside Meitei mobs. In Kangpokpi, firefights broke out repeatedly along NH-02, making it a flashpoint between valley and hill forces. These events are not distant memories, they shape daily anxieties. Communities in the hills remember too clearly how convoys were ambushed, homes set ablaze, and lives destroyed. To reopen the routes under current conditions would be, in their eyes, to invite the same disasters once more. Another factor deepens the Kuki-Zo Council's resistance to highway reopening, the still unresolved problem of looted arms. When mobs stormed police stations and armories across Imphal Valley in 2023, they carried away over 1,000 guns, including advanced assault rifles, sniper weapons, and grenade launchers. Along with them went tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition. Official statements in 2024 and 2025 claimed that some arms had been recovered, but reports from security analysts and investigative journalists agree that the majority remain missing. These weapons have not vanished. They have been absorbed into the arsenals of valley-based armed groups. The United National Liberation Front, with around 1,500 cadres, continues to be a formidable actor. Groups such as KYKL, KCP, and PREPAK also remain heavily armed. Even if peace is projected on the surface, these organizations still hold an arsenal sufficient to destabilize the state at any moment. To open NH-02 under such circumstances, with thousands of rifles and explosives still unaccounted for, is to place ordinary commuters at the mercy of heavily armed militants. The fact that the government has yet to enforce full disarmament feeds the fear that the next war is not a matter of if, but when. For Kuki communities, the mistrust extends beyond militant groups to the state forces themselves. Viral footage from 2023 showed police commandos allegedly assisting valley mobs in attacking Kuki settlements. Eyewitnesses in Sugnu accused security forces of providing covering fire while homes were torched. These incidents have left deep resentment and eroded confidence in the neutrality of state law enforcement. From the Kuki perspective, depending on such forces for safety is no longer an option. Central paramilitary deployment is tolerated as a stabilizing presence, but state forces are seen as compromised. This explains why Kuki volunteers insist on maintaining defensive vigilance. Their standpoint has consistently been that highways and buffer zones cannot be opened until stolen weapons are returned, militants neutralized, and impartial enforcement guaranteed. Their position is not motivated by a desire for confrontation, but by the principle of survival. They argue that their stance is defensive, not aggressive, and that their vigilance prevents another round of mass killings. An additional dimension to their standpoint is political. Many Kuki leaders and volunteers maintain that the call for separate administration is not born out of ambition or desire for power, but rather out of necessity. In their view, separate administration is the only way to ensure the survival of minority rights within the framework of the Indian Constitution. They stress that the Indian Constitution itself provides guarantees for the protection of minorities, and when these guarantees are repeatedly violated in practice, the demand for administrative separation becomes a demand for survival. They argue that only through such an arrangement can their rights, security, and identity be preserved against majoritarian dominance and militant threats. The debate about free movement must therefore be understood not as a technical argument, but as a matter of existential stakes. For Meitei groups, reopening the highway symbolizes connectivity and dominance. For the Kukis, it symbolizes vulnerability to attack. Without the neutralization of heavily armed valley militants and the return of looted weapons, the idea of open highways is perceived as reckless and suicidal. Security analysts have warned repeatedly about the risks of ignoring these realities. Reports in 2024 compared Manipur's situation to a tinderbox where a spark could ignite statewide conflict. With over 1,000 missing weapons and multiple heavily armed outfits in play, the risk of escalation is constant. Even a minor skirmish could quickly spiral into wider battles, drawing in civilian areas and once again turning Manipur's villages and highways into battlefields. The Kuki-Zo Council's urgent notice must therefore be read as more than a clarification. It is also a reminder to the Ministry of Home Affairs and the wider public that peace in Manipur is fragile, conditional, and reversible. It signals that the scars of 2023 and 2024 are far from healed, and that reopening routes without addressing the root causes is not peace-building, but provocation. The conditions laid down by Kuki volunteers reflect this realism. They demand full surrender of looted arms, the neutralization of militant groups, accountability for state forces accused of collusion, and reliable guarantees of neutral enforcement. Until these conditions are fulfilled, they declare, the highway will not be opened and the buffer zones will not be dismantled. In their eyes, their vigilance is the only defense left to a community repeatedly exposed to violence and betrayal. The larger implication is sobering. Manipur today remains on edge, with unresolved grievances, unrecovered arms, and unpunished acts of violence. Without addressing these, any talk of free movement or dismantling of buffer zones will only deepen mistrust and risk another round of conflict. The Kuki-Zo Council's statement may appear to be a matter of administrative clarification, but in reality it is a stark warning. The conditions for peace are not yet met, and until they are, survival demands vigilance. This perspective should not be dismissed as obstructionism. It reflects the lived experience of a minority community that has suffered displacement, destruction, and death. Their insistence on survival through vigilance, buffer zones, and the possibility of separate administration is consistent with the rights guaranteed under the Indian Constitution. To ignore this context would be to misunderstand the reality of Manipur's fragile and dangerous landscape. In the end, the notice of September 2025 reveals the truth that peace in Manipur cannot be declared by notification alone. It must be built through genuine disarmament, accountability, and trust. Until then, the highways will remain contested, buffer zones indispensable, and Kuki volunteers steadfast in their resolve to guard their people. Disclaimer: this analysis is based on the urgent notice issued by the Kuki-Zo Council on September 15, 2025, reports of violence and security measures in Manipur during 2023 and 2024, assessments of looted arms and militant group activities, as well as publicly available news and eyewitness testimonies. Figures concerning weapon recoveries and cadre strength are drawn from media and security sources and may vary as recoveries continue. The analysis aims to provide interpretive understanding of current events and should not be treated as an official statement of any community or authority.